Hey, folks, welcome to another edition of Dog Walk Talk presented to you by DawgsHQ. As always, I'm your host, Jake Bruce, and with me, as always, the man himself, beat writer over at DawgsHQ. That's Palmer Thomas. PT, what's good with you, brother?
Doing well over here. Just ready to hit the road up to Knoxville, back to the home state. My parents spent a little bit of time in Knoxville before I was born, so they're making the trip from Nashville to Knoxville. Excited to see them briefly and excited to see this game on Saturday.
Yeah, I got nothing personal against the Tennessee Vols, but I got to tell you, I've never really had much of a good time in Knoxville. I've been up there a couple times, just haven't found the spots, man.
The armpit of America before.
I haven't found the spots. I've been told by people who have lived there and gone to school there that there's some great bars and great restaurants. I hadn't found them. So if you're listening to this and you know somewhere, send it our way because I'd love to find it next time I get up there. But apropos of nothing related to going out this weekend, though I'm sure Palmer will figure out a way to work one in. Georgia headed up to Knoxville as well. 3:30 kickoff. Another CBS game for Georgia. Another good slot for them when it comes to some national exposure. And an interesting matchup, I think, with this one. Tennessee clicking at the right time for sure. This team we talked about, I think, earlier on in the season. It seemed like they were taking some steps forward. I think Josh Heupel has outperformed my expectations in year one. I would be surprised if that's not the case for most Tennessee fans as well. I think that I'll be honest with you. When he got the job, I said, this guy's a sacrificial lamb. I said, this will be like a 3-and-out thing because I just thought that everything was in such disarray that it would be hard for anybody to pull it back together after the Jeremy Pruitt firing and all the surrounding mess with that. But credit to him, man. Josh Heupel has proven, that he could translate that offense over from UCF into the SEC. And, the Tennessee Vols really clicking on all cylinders. Simultaneously, I was saying, though, yesterday, the Bulldogs getting healthy at the right time. So it's a little bit of a duality in this one. It kind of goes both ways. Both teams have their upside. Palmer, looking at this matchup, I guess what stands out to you? What are you looking forward to seeing out of Georgia's contest with the Vols?
Yeah, before we dive too deep in, I want to ask your opinion on this here with the Josh Heupel talk. SEC Coach of the Year, potentially? Or do you have to give it to Kirby Smart if the Bulldogs are to win this game, finish out the SEC slate undefeated? I mean,
you got an argument.
Is this game for SEC Coach of the Year?
It may very well be. I think you've got an argument either way, to be honest with you. Primarily just because of the job Heupel's done, but. And Kirby probably deserves some really, really hard consideration given what's gone on around college football this year and, just the seeming gap between 1 and 2. I mean, I know that he won't admit to there being such a thing, but it sure feels that way. And I think that that's the national perception as well. So, this could be the one, man. I mean, if I'll tell you what, if Josh Heupel were to knock off the Bulldogs, Josh Heupel and the Vols were to knock off the Bulldogs, I think you'd have to give it to him if they were to pull that one out. But either way, I don't think either of those would be a bad choice at all.
Yeah. Just in terms of outperforming expectations, Heupel certainly more so than anybody else in this league so far this season. Maybe you could make a case for Sam Pittman if Arkansas had been able to keep up what they were doing.
Yeah, Stoops was probably on that wave as well.
Whenever Kentucky has a decent season. Heupel going on the road last weekend to beat Kentucky. Arkansas has a chance to win some big games down the stretch, but I think that you can make a very strong case for Josh Heupel as an SEC Coach of the Year, which says
no doubt
a lot about what this Tennessee team has done. You mentioned it, that they are an offensive juggernaut and the way that they have been able to translate, a non-traditional offense, especially non-traditional to the SEC, and bring that in with some success. Transfer quarterbacks, running backs that are stepping into bigger roles. Tennessee lost a lot in the offseason.
Oh, no. Yeah.
And
I mean, that was what I was going to say is like, I mean, they got crushed. They lost some of the absolute best players on that squad, which is, again, kind of what went into my thought of, like, oh, my God, this guy has got it up against him. Eric Gray's gone. You got Keyshawn Lawrence leaves for Oklahoma. I mean, everybody left and went to Oklahoma.
To and Ty Chandler and
yep.
The linebacker that's up at Michigan State, whose name I'm drawing.
Tavares Crouch.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, those are 5 of the best players on that squad, 5 of the top recruits that they got during that era. And then they all mass exodus at one time. That would be hard for anybody to come back from. I don't care how good of a coach you are, but credit.
So so credit to what Heupel has done so far this season. He brings in 2 quarterbacks between Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton. Milton gets the start to kick off the season, but Hooker has been the one that has stepped in and been the saving grace for the Volunteers. Having spoken with our Tennessee reporter for the week, Ryan Schumpert, who is over at Rocky Top Insider, have a Q&A piece with him coming out later today on Wednesday as we're recording this. But he said for what has been a largely optimistic, positive year, the only question that kind of still remains and lingers over what year Tennessee has had is what could have been had they started Hendon Hooker in week 1. You might not see the Volunteers losing to Pitt, which if they're able to do that, what are they able to do? Early on in that SEC slate as they take on Florida. To me, looking at Tennessee's schedule, things really turned around for the Volunteers when they went on the road and beat Missouri. That is a game that I was shocked at the final score there.
Yeah, I think everyone was.
62-24. Tennessee started the year 2-2. They beat Bowling Green in the season opener, but they don't look great. They go and lose to Pitt. And then, who really cares about a 56-0 win over Tennessee Tech? They lose to Florida. And you're looking at this team like, man, they lost to 2 good opponents and they, didn't play great against one of their, lesser quality opponents and beat the crap out of Tennessee Tech, but it's Tennessee Tech. To me, that the turning point of this season was that 62-24 win over Missouri, and they've ridden that momentum. Obviously, they lost tough games, hard fought games to Ole Miss and Alabama, but then they go on the road and they beat Kentucky. Coming into October, I very well thought that Georgia could be facing a Tennessee team that's under 500. On Saturday, they are going to be 5-4, and that's a testament to what Heupel has been able to do with this offense. Defense not necessarily up to SEC standards. They're not going to blow anybody out of the waters there. But what Hooker has done, 21 touchdown passes, 2 interceptions, one of the best quarterback ratings in the country. They throw the ball, but they build their offense around their ability to run the ball. And then they take those deep shots. They don't throw the ball in the intermediate range a ton. They'll throw it short. Hooker has legs where he can run too. To me, I think that this game, it puts a lot of pressure on Georgia's defense. And I think we've talked about that several times over the last couple of weeks, kind of leading up to this game, looking ahead and saying, hey, this Tennessee offense could put some pressure on Georgia's defense. Probably their biggest test to date. I mean, the Volunteers have put up 45 points against Kentucky. They put up 24 against Alabama, 26 against Ole Miss, which, that score surprised me. I thought that game would have been a little more high scoring, but they put up 45 points against South Carolina, 62, like we mentioned, against Missouri. So, 3 games in the last 3 of the last 5 games, they've scored 45 or more points. And that's a testament to what Hooker does. They're fast. They run a lot of plays. As Lewis Seen told us earlier this week, if they are running a play every 8 seconds. We have to be ready every 5. And that puts a ton of pressure on this Georgia defense to be ready to, to communicate from sideline to sideline very quickly. This week in practice, they're running multiple scout teams, having fresh legs so that, because it's so hard to replicate what Tennessee is able to do if you don't do that on a week in and week out basis. And that's not at all what Georgia does. Georgia is willing to run the clock a little bit and take its time. They're not, pressing the, gas pedal the entire time. I asked Kirby if, to try and compare this to an offense that he's faced before. The one that comes to mind for me would be Gus Malzahn and some of the tempo offenses that he ran at Auburn early in his career there. But he wouldn't make that comparison. It's different than what Gus does. He said it's very similar to what, he said they have gone back and watched film from what Missouri did when Heupel was the offensive coordinator there. And so, kind of a cop out there.
Okay.
Kirby, would have liked to see a comparison to another coach rather than to a previous stop. But, in terms of what this offense does, they put pressure on you. Tyen Evans is a pretty good ball carrier, as is Jabari Small. Those two guys. Hendon Hooker, not a bad ball carrier himself.
Yeah, definitely.
And so in terms of yards per game, Evans and Small are in the top 20 of the SEC, top 15, I believe. Hooker in that top 20 range as well. Between those three guys, you've got 14 touchdowns accounted for on the ground, and Hooker's 21 through the air. On the receiving end of those big plays, there's three guys, again, Velus Jones Jr., who JT Daniels is very familiar with, having thrown to him at USC, Cedric Tillman, and Javonte Payton. Those guys have 5, 5, and 6 in terms of touchdowns. So it's very clear who these guys, who Georgia needs to pay attention to. Peyton has hit on some big plays. He's only got 14 receptions this year, 365 yards and 6 touchdowns, averaging 1.6 receptions per game, but 40.6 yards. So he's making big plays through the air. These guys, Jones Jr. and Tillman, bringing in 4 balls a game. And so, those guys are probably going to be the consistent threat versus Peyton as the, big play threat. Maybe, could compare him to Arian Smith on Georgia's roster in terms of the speed and his ability to make a big play happen anytime he's on the field, but not necessarily being consistently targeted. Looking at this offensive line, obviously there's a very familiar face for Georgia fans, and that's Kade Mays at right tackle. It's interesting, in speaking to some Tennessee folks, Mays was voted a first team all SEC player in the preseason. That really raised eyebrows there. They given the fact that he had been a very good contributor for them at guard and not as good of a contributor at tackle, that was a surprise, I think, because of what he did at Georgia, the name that he is, the name that he was coming out of recruiting. That's a name that a lot of, media and coaches, were going to vote for in terms of what his potential was at tackle. And he's probably performed at an all SEC level. He was offensive lineman of the week last week for Tennessee. Over at left tackle, they've got Darnell Wright, who was a former big time recruit. The strength of this offensive line is at the tackle position, versus on the interior, they are not nearly as strong. But it is ironic that they, build their game around being able to run the ball. And so where Georgia has the potential to beat them would be on that inside, where Georgia is very strong with that defensive line. Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, Jalen Carter, Trayvon Walker, when you bring him inside, on a stunt or something, those guys are able to affect plays in the middle, whether that's stopping the run or getting after the quarterback. So, to me, I think this game comes down to whether Tennessee's defense can get stops, and because this offense is going to be under fire more than they have been in the past. They've been able to put up the points, but they also haven't played a defense up to the caliber of Georgia. And so, you've got to assume that they're probably not going to put up 45 points in this game. Georgia hasn't allowed more than 14 points this season to an opponent. And so, the pressure becomes, what's that?
Actually just 13.
13.
Yeah. 13. Nobody's top 13.
And so the pressure gets put on that Tennessee defense to make some stops, to slow down this Georgia offense. I said it earlier today. I think that, if Tennessee wants to make this a game, they've got to score early and they've got to get stops early. That's how you keep this kneeling crowd into it, and instead of having them head for the exits early in the second half.
Well, or give them some golf balls to throw. I guess that's another effective way to keep them hanging around.
Catch up and all that good stuff.
Yeah, like you said, Georgia fans should be pretty familiar with this front. Kade Mays, obviously a former Georgia Bulldog. Darnell Washington was a guy they were pretty heavily involved with in that recruitment.
Darnell Wright.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Darnell Wright. And then, Cooper Mays was a kid that Georgia offered. And I wrote a couple stories on him back in the day. So, these are guys that I know. When I'm looking at this Tennessee roster, for me, there's not really like a position that that screams elite to me. But in terms of guys I know, and in terms of upside, their secondary is pretty good. There's definitely some names back there that I recognize, that are that were high profile guys back in the day. And maybe it hasn't panned out exactly how we thought it would for them. But at the same time, I always feel like guys like that have the ability to, make plays at some juncture. It may not be a career long thing, but they have that ability in them to make it happen. So that's interesting to me to see. Now, I'm going to put this one to you, Palmer. When you're talking about this Tennessee team, you mentioned, all the stats and the points and everything. Is this the week Georgia gives up more than 13 points?
I think so. I was asked for a score prediction earlier today and hadn't given much thought to it. But just off the cuff said, I think maybe 45-21, that I think Tennessee's going to be able to put up points. I think because of what they do offensively and how many plays they're running, how many times you have to be right over and over and over again. Odds are the more times you force this Georgia defense to be right, the more opportunities that you have for them to be wrong and for them to slip up. So, I think that they're, very easily, oftentimes when you watch this Tennessee film, you see him hit on a big play and it's like, oh, well, how is that wide receiver so open? It's because the defense isn't set. And so the pressure is put on the secondary there to get set very quickly. Again, going back to what Lewis said, and that has stood out to me all week. If they're running a play every 8 seconds, we have to be ready every 5. And that's a lot of communication to do very quickly. And so if you're not ready, these wide receivers can burn you deep.
I think, though, that this is an opportunity. Georgia, look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be some sort of film guy. We let John Rick handle that. I'm not a scheme guy. I'm a writer. Okay, that's what I do. And I'm a very close payer attentioner of this team. So I'm not going to get into scheme, but I'll tell you this. I think that what you have to do, in my opinion, to deal with a team like this is you just got to dumb it down. It can't be complex. It's got to be a lot of see ball, get ball. You got to let your athletes, John, Rick, if you get over and check out our film study with him from Missouri, great piece this week, as it is every week. He did a fantastic job. But he said, look, you just got to trust that your O's are better than their X's. And I think that that's what you got to rely on. Georgia is going to should be able to out-athlete Tennessee. From a talent perspective, the gap is still pretty significant. Now you throw those 5 guys they lost back into the mix, it's a little bit tighter. No question about it. But it's a pretty sizable gap here when you're talking about the level of talent between these two teams. I do agree with you. I think Tennessee is going to be able to score. I think that they will break that 13 mark. I don't know that I'm ready to give a score prediction just yet. I mean, the line on this one is about 20.5 is what it looks like it's sitting at, which is that's a pretty sizable show of respect from Vegas when it comes to these Georgia games of late, because the lines have been pretty wide. That one's a little tighter than you would expect.
I hear the question. If you've got it pulled up, what's the over under here?
The over under on this one is pretty much looks like the consensus is about 56.
Wow. I would have expected it to be higher than that.
Yeah. So, I think, I don't know. We talked about this, Georgia, I think has really worked themselves into a position, and I think that this can benefit them against a team like Tennessee. Georgia is capable of, and should be, especially in this instance against a lesser talented defense, of taking the ball and keep playing keep away from you. They can grind it out. And I think that that's going to be, I think that you'll see that be a big feature on Saturday because the less opportunities you can give Tennessee, the better. Because they can hit from all over the place and they can score quick, and they're going to put you back on defense. They're going to try to gash you. So you need that opportunity to, let your guys get some breaths. And also, too, this is a great spot for Georgia to be in terms of their depth. I think that the defensive depth here and some of the reps these young guys have gotten early on in this season have been beneficial and will be beneficial in this game, because you'll be able to sub some guys in quick, get some fresh legs out there and keep it rolling. So, I think that if I'm looking at that spread 20.5, I think that feels about right to me. I think it's going to probably be around that area. I think Georgia probably covers that spread if I'm guessing today. But that's it's going to be an interesting test. And personally, I think it comes at a good time for Georgia. You're going to the SEC championship, right? I mean, you've got 2 games past this that, let's call it what they are. The talent differential is pretty significant. Charleston Southern is the Little Sisters of the Poor, and then you got Georgia Tech, which started off pretty strong and then kind of fizzled. So this is a big test, and this is a good one because it's probably unlike anything you've seen this year, and it's probably going to be reminiscent of something that you might see in an SEC championship game, in my opinion. Your thoughts, Palmer?
Yeah, I agree with that. Just thinking about that line and that over under, I would take the over there. But I think that the score prediction I gave earlier today, that again, just haven't put a ton of thought into it, but just off the cuff, 45-21, something like that. Like you said, I do think Tennessee has the offense that can they can top that 13-point threshold. And it's not like Georgia hasn't been, pressured to, teams haven't put the pressure on Georgia to trying to top that. I mean, sure. Missouri was close to it,
sure.
Or at least close to matching it. Last week with, a 4th and goal at the end of the game, and probably should have scored, had a couple of opportunities, and maybe had they stuck to the ground, they would have. Just teams have put pressure on Georgia. It's not like that 13 is this magical number, this brick wall that nobody's been able to bust through. They haven't been able to so far, but Georgia has.
I don't know. I mean, when they've gotten, I'll tell you what, man, when they've gotten to those goal line situations, I mean, ask Missouri, ask those guys. I mean,
they take it seriously.
They're brick walling it, man.
Absolutely, they take it seriously. But I mean, Kentucky probably should have topped it by making an extra point instead of having it blocked. But so there's 14. You look at Missouri, they missed a field goal. That would have gotten them to 9, plus that opportunity for a late touchdown there that they missed out on. That would have topped it. I think that teams can top that 14-point total, a 13-point total. And I think that if there's an offense that is able to do it, it's this Tennessee offense, just by the way that they spread you out and make you cover the entire field. Kirby mentioned this week that a lot of the times you're seeing teams, bunched in, with receivers out there spread out, but tight to, the ball. Tennessee's putting guys outside of the numbers. I mean, they are playing wide. They spread you out, and that opens things up for their running game too. So, whether that's the running backs or the quarterback, I don't see Georgia slipping up here, but I could see this. I do think this Tennessee offense will give them some trouble, more than some of these other offenses have, because of, how limited Missouri was at quarterback with their starter out and rotating guys, with how limited Kentucky was, not being able to run the ball, and trying to get the ball to Wan'Dale Robinson, but they were doing it at the line of scrimmage. They weren't able to, get the ball downfield. To me, I think the best offensive game plan I've seen from a team so far this season against Georgia was South Carolina, was their ability to stretch the field and get the ball downfield. I think that game, I think back on that game, and Josh Vann, and by the way, great job, South Carolina, with that gate code 4117.
4017, yeah.
Good job, South Carolina.
Yeah.
But in terms of just how I think Tennessee can attack this team, it is that vertical passing game. It is the speed of these receivers. I mean, Kirby said it best this week. He said, hey, we know the guys that they're beating. Looking at the film, we know the guys that they are running past, and they're good players. And so that means that these receivers are good players too.
Yep. No question about it. It's going to be an interesting one. Like I said, I just think it comes at a good time for Georgia. I think it's a good shadow, perhaps, of what's to come, if you want to phrase it that way.
Yeah, because if you look at Alabama or or Ohio State, a potential matchup, which if playoff started today, that's who Georgia would be matched up against. Those teams have the first round talent receivers. Yeah. I don't know that these guys are first round caliber, but they are NFL receivers probably. And I think that Georgia is going to be challenged down the road more than they have been. I mean, even looking at these teams that they have played that have had a talented wide receiver, whether that was Wan'Dale Robinson, Kentucky didn't have Josh Ali on the other side. He was out for that game. Josh Vann was limited, or South Carolina was limited because Josh Vann was their, only big name wide receiver that they can really stretch the field with. Other teams are going to have multiple wide receivers, and Tennessee has multiple wide receivers that they can get the ball to, down the field and make plays for big gains. Alabama does, Texas A&M does, if that's who Georgia were to play. And then looking into the playoffs, there's several teams that do. And so, I completely agree with you here that this could be a good prep for, and ever since Georgia clinched the SEC East, it's all been about preparing, each and every week, preparing to play in that postseason, knowing that you have that, what are you doing over these next 4 games to ready yourself for that? This is a great opportunity to ready yourself for a challenge that you are likely to face in Atlanta or Miami or Dallas or Indianapolis or wherever Georgia's going to be playing its postseason football.
Palmer over here already got the team looking ahead to the SEC title. He's ready to skim over the last 4 games. Get ready for that game. No, I agree.
You call Charleston Southern the sisters of the poor.
Look, what are we going to – come on. What are we going to – we're going to act like this is the Indianapolis Colts? I mean, the Charleston Southern, for God's sakes. It is what it is. But, no, I'm with you. I understand what you're saying. Speaking, though, of looking ahead, we'll look ahead a little bit here in the world of recruiting. Because Georgia got one coming up. Now, we can't look too far ahead. This will drop on Thursday morning, and this will be Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern time, out of Houston, Texas area, and that's going to be Julian Humphrey, the commitment of Julian Humphrey, 4-star cornerback over on free.com, a guy who I think Georgia fans have gotten pretty familiar with over the course of this season. I think that there was some interest and some, talk, it seemed maybe in the spring and the summer, and there was a visit, but it seems like things really kind of took off around August with Georgia and Julian Humphrey. And at that time was a Florida commit, but people didn't really think that was going to stick. And sure enough, it didn't. And Georgia looks to be the benefactor here. Now, what I've heard, and this could change, of course, we're pretty close into this. We're recording this on Wednesday, and this is going out on Friday. what I've heard is that Texas A&M making a huge push here and really putting the pressure on when it comes to Julian Humphrey. Texas A&M with a great pickup with Walter Nolan the other day. Looks like they're really surging in this class, coming on at the right time late in the season like this. And so they're going to make it difficult for the Bulldogs. But I got to tell you, I think that one of the things that has struck me about Julian and his comments have been, he pointed to the fact that the first collegiate coach who came out and saw him in person was Will Muschamp. Muschamp got out there on a Friday night. I forget which night it was. I forget what was going on the day after. I think it was a home game, though, if I'm not mistaken. But he flew into
Houston. I think it was before his official visit.
Yeah. I think you're right.
I think it was Thursday before his official visit.
So that was like what, Arkansas? I think.
Kentucky, Arkansas.
I think it was. I want to say it was Arkansas. So, but he got out to see him, and that was a really big. That ended up, I think, really striking a chord with the kid. Made a big impression on him, and looks like it's going to benefit Georgia. Georgia's my pick for Julian Humphrey. I think that this is a situation where they, are in a good position with several of the top defensive backs in this class. Jaheim Singletary's still out there, Kamari Wilson, but this guy, one of those speed merchant cornerbacks, maybe not Keely Ringo's size, not a 6'2.5" guy out there, but maybe a little bit more like Darion Kendrick. And I there's nothing wrong with that. I think Georgia fans would agree. So, kudos again if they land the kid. Major kudos to Jamal Adai. I think that he's really proven his mettle as one of Georgia's lead recruiters. The charge was pretty clear when he got here, what they needed to do and how quickly they needed to do it. And it looks like in the 2022 class, it's all going to come together for them. If all those parts were to hold, kudos to him. Big round of applause. I think the guy's done an amazing job, no question.
Yeah, just adding on to that a little bit. Like you said, it was clear when Adai got to UGA that they needed to regroup in the secondary, that they needed to reload. And that became even more prevalent, after spring practice. In terms of Georgia lost 8 guys, from last year's secondary, that they're probably not at the numbers that they need to be at right now. And Kirby has said that this season, that he hasn't said that directly about, hey, this is why we're prioritizing so many defensive backs on the recruiting trail. But it's very clear when you put, his comments there and his actions on the recruiting trail. When you put those together, it's very clear that was a big priority in this class of 2022. Whether it is Singletary or Humphrey or whoever Georgia's able to add, on down the road, in terms of the secondary, certainly big pickups and potential for some early playing time, because you look at Georgia's secondary, that they lost 8, but they're probably going to lose some more guys this year. I mean, like you mentioned, Darion Kendrick, he's draft eligible and probably gone. Lewis Seen is draft eligible and probably gone. Chris Smith is a guy who could go, maybe would have that opportunity to come back for, use his last year of eligibility through the COVID season. Latavius Brenny is another guy who's a veteran in the secondary. William Poole is a guy that they're probably going to lose after this year. Amir Speed. And so, you're looking at a really, really young and inexperienced secondary next year. Some of these guys that are coming in, very talented, they're going to be going up against other talented and non-experienced guys. So, that's certainly going to be interesting to see how Georgia finishes this class out in the secondary, and interesting to see how these guys are able to come in, whether that's in the spring or in the summer, and compete for jobs right off the bat.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's no doubt about it. I think that, like you said, early playing time's there for the taking. I think that's a big appeal for a lot of these guys. It's a good selling point for Georgia, and kudos to him for having it ready. Turning the page just a little bit, it is the most wonderful time of the year if you're a Georgia hoops fan, that is, and that's it's Georgia basketball season. Bulldogs had their first game, FIU, right? Now listen, I'm going to be honest with everybody on this podcast. Palmer already knows this. I know nothing about Georgia basketball. I do not watch college basketball. I don't really care about it. I'll watch a little bit of March Madness. I'll go cover a kid if I have to. If somebody forces my hand in that, I will. I don't know what I'm watching, but I have been to a couple high school basketball games. But Dogs get it kicked off against FIU, first game of the year. Another year under Tom Crean. And Georgia fans, I don't think you're too happy about that being the case, but is what it is. Palmer, I know that you follow the team a lot more closely than I do. So any quick takeaways from game one for the Dogs when it comes to the hoops?
Well, and a shout out to our young Jack Matheson covering the team this year. He'll be helping
big ups to Jack. Big ups.
He'll be helping us with basketball coverage, especially in this overlap period of football and basketball late in the football season and early in the basketball season. But yeah, Georgia comes out on top 58-51 last night, Tuesday night at Stegman Coliseum over Florida International. This is going to be a very interesting team to watch because they lose. I believe it was 9 players since the start of the 2020-2021 season. They've lost 9 players to the transfer portal. They bring in 10 and one of those guys that they were going to be counting on, PJ Horn, the only returning starter from last year, using his last year of eligibility. COVID year wasn't going to be counting against the scholarship total, so it was almost an extra body. He tears his ACL and he will be out for the season. So obviously a tough blow for him, after he made the decision to return to UGA. So it's going to be a lot of fresh faces for Georgia fans. Starting lineup last night had no returning players from last year.
That's what you want to hear. That's a good sign.
Yeah, but, it's certainly a talented group. Aaron Cook led the team in scoring last night. He had 10 points. He's a Gonzaga point guard transfer. So he's been around winning basketball. They had Jabri Abdur-Rahim in the starting lineup last night. He's a transfer from Virginia, been around winning basketball, although the Hoos lose to Navy on night 1. FAU transfer Jalen Ingram coming home. He's from Madison. He was in the lineup alongside Cario Oquendo and Braylon Bridges. Bridges from Atlanta. So another, Georgia native. They bring in players from Southern Cal, couple guys out of high school, couple guys from JUCO, and Illinois, Chicago. And so these guys this is a much bigger Georgia team this year in terms of size. You can tell that just by looking through the roster. I can't remember the last time. I think it was 2018, 2019 season that Georgia had someone that was 6'11", and that was Nick Claxton, who's now playing for the Nets. Georgia's got 2 guys at that size now, between Braylon Bridges, the redshirt senior, 5th-year senior, as well as true freshman Tyrone Baker. Those guys certainly going to be counted on, but obviously you're going to be looking at other guys as well, to provide a little bit of a, boost for the team. Going to be an interesting group to watch. It was interesting to watch them last night. 11 turnovers in the first half is not what you want to see, but they turned that around in the second half and held on to the ball a lot better, played a much better defense, limited FIU's 3-point shooting. And so it's going to be very interesting to see this team as they continue to gel and continue to get used to playing basketball with each other. So far this season, they've played a bunch of inter-squad scrimmages and 2 exhibition games. So, to go on before the season opener last night. And so, this is a team that's going to continue to grow together. They've got a tough non-conference slate, travel to Cincinnati this weekend, have Georgia Tech at home later, play Virginia in a tip-off classic around Thanksgiving. Providence and Northwestern are, the same result, opponent. from that other game on the other side of the bracket. They'll match up with them. Wofford is a team that a mid-major that has had some success, as well as George Mason. And then they've got a top 15, potentially top 10 Memphis team coming in. That's just in the non-conference slate. Obviously the SEC, a tough challenge as well, leading the way this year with 5 teams ranked in the tied for first in terms of teams ranked in the top 25 to start the year. Kentucky, led by Georgia transfer Xavier Wheeler. Auburn has a bunch of guys, including Georgia transfer Kade Johnson. Alabama coming off of a run to the Elite Eight. Arkansas, who was one of the top seeds. They'll play Auburn twice, as well as a Tennessee team that is highly ranked as well. Shot the lights out this last night. And so certainly an interesting time of the year. Going to be very interesting to follow this Georgia basketball team and see how things play out.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's all I know about.
We might need to have Jack onto the podcast at some point.
We're going to have Jack onto the podcast when football season's over, because like I said, this is not anything I know anything about.
100 days to Georgia baseball. If that
there you go. Another thing I know nothing about. So luckily for me, recruiting never stops, and so that's the beauty of what I do, and so that's what I get to focus on. I think that's it for me this week, PT. You got anything else, brother?
Ready to hit the road up to Knoxville. Like you said, I've been up there a couple times, but haven't been too lucky in terms of finding the right spot. So if you've got any recommendations, hit me up. If you're going to be up there, hit me up, and would love to run into some Dog Walk Talk listeners, DawgsHQ members. Would love to run into you all at some point, whether that's up in Knoxville or down in Athens. In Atlanta, somewhere, right there in the middle, in terms of, just would love to make those connections, and, really appreciate everything that y'all have done to, help us grow the site. Yeah. It's been great so far. If you want to find Palmer, you can probably go to the Mouse's Ear. I'll let him Google that after we get done, but go check it out. Get over to DawgsHQ. Like I said, we've got the John Rick film study up. We've got some recent offer news. We've got a great piece, I thought, on Darius Smith. I know I wrote it, but the interview with Coach Jordan Mullis of Appleton County, I thought was a fantastic interview. Really, really impactful stuff from him. So pat yourself on the back, Ruth. I just ask the questions, and then they say the good stuff, and then I publish and get credit for it. So I think that's it. Get over to DawgsHQ, check us out. We got a lot of stuff going on and a lot more to come for sure. And we look forward to seeing you over there. And make sure to tune into the next edition of Dog Walk Talk, presented to you by DawgsHQ. We'll see you guys next time.